Sup? Welcome to Tales Tomorrow. I'm Morrow, your storyteller for today, and with me I have some more RPG horror stories. I got a question for DMs out there, or really players. What are your favorite type of music for D&D sessions, or really TTRPG sessions in general? If you have like some sort of a suggestion for a game or a specific like composer to look into, I would love to hear that in the comment section below. I've been primarily pulling a lot of the tracks from Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. Oh my god, they have some of the greatest, most epic tracks. There's a playlist on YouTube that has them like extended to be like twice as long because the tracks themselves are like what, like a minute and a half, and that's just not enough time, enough kind of like vibe and feel to really strike at the hearts of the players. So yeah, I've been using that. If you have any of your own personal suggestions for what kind of music you like to use for your TTRPG experiences, leave them down in the comments below. I'm gonna get to the first RPG horror story for today. Main character Syndrome player tries to slay a whole city on his own against the party's wishes because he didn't like he took damage. So I'm a first-time DM playing in a homebrew medieval system I created. I know it's a terrible idea, but I didn't think this through at the time. Also obligatory in a non-English speaker, so sorry for any mistakes. So the cast is Witch, Lewis, Paladin, Percival, Edgy Human, Akuma, Metamorph, Problem Player, I'll call him Anthony, not the real names. Wow, everybody else got cool name, and the one guy that's a problem player, Anthony. It's just, that's Tony over there. Tony is a problem player. The start of the storm. It all started on one of Anthony's first sessions. We were in the forest, walking from Azathoth to Kretu. They had a boss fight with a puppeteer that later became a party member. This puppeteer was controlling some trees. I want to explain the puppeteer system for brevity's sake, but he was sitting on one of the tree branches and he was protecting a treasure the players wanted. So the boss fight started and everything was going fine until his turn started. Can I transform into a missile? Are you sure? Yeah, why not? Okay, I'll roll for it. Wait, hold on. You have a player that can turn into... Wait, hold on, what? You have a... What do you roll to turn into an intercontinental ballistic missile? What do you roll? DM, what do you roll for that? I'm curious. Yep, I let him do it because I was that much of a people pleaser. But he rolled low. Hold on. Whoa. I think the problem isn't the player. I think the problem is you just allow the player to do whatever they want without any sort of semblance. Why let him turn into a missile? Is this like a normal feature for your homebrew system or your class? You said it's medieval. If it's medieval, why can't it turn into an ICBM? Why are you letting your player turn into an ice? Why are you letting your player roll to turn to ICBM? You should just say no. Of course, it can't become an ICBM. Can't just become an intercontinental ballistic missile. Just do something else. Fire a crossbow or something. But he rolled low and missed. And when I told him he missed, he tried to retcon it, and he kept going for it for the whole fight. It was so bad, Lewis called him out on it and helped me to tell him, hey man, you can't just add things on your actions after low rolls just to escape the consequences. And that was that, right? Wrong. We didn't even get to the title. The Eye of the Storm. Okay, so I'm already anticipating some things, and sorry for jumping right in between. I know I shouldn't be doing that. I know I shouldn't be. But I feel like you already pointed out the problem here. You're a people pleaser, so you probably allowed the player to do whatever they wanted, and that's kind of the crux of the problem. Yeah, the definitely player shouldn't be trying to turn it to an ICBM out of nowhere as DM, like, hey DM, what I rolled to turn it to a missile. But also, I feel like it's also onus on the DM to say no to players that want to do that. If you're the DM and a player asks you to do something ridiculously diabolical, you can say no. You're allowed to say no. You're the DM. It's your game. You can make the rules. You can call the shots. You don't have to just appease the weird requests of your problem player, you know? Okay, so they got to Kretu, a city whose only inhabitants were talking rodents. Okay, Anthony and Percival went to the magic college of the rats, Ratvard. Anthony was disguised on Percival's armor, and the rats were pretty chill. And the party was going to take a grimoire to learn more about magic. Sweet. But Anthony made a huge mistake. He transformed back on himself in front of everyone. But he didn't know that in the same college, another metamorph invaded someday, disguised themselves, and killed a portion of the students, and then was killed by the principal there. So the rats started throwing notebooks at them, and they teleported away to a Ala NPC's lake. But Anthony was fuming, so much so that the Percival had to try to calm him down. But he couldn't, so he started going back to Kretu. So Percival, Lewis, and Akuma, that was another session so they could come, followed him to try to stop him from causing a literal genocide. They had a fight in which Anthony turned into a freaking meteor, tried to kill everyone. So PvP went off and Akuma literally kamikazes himself. Keep in mind this was Akuma's first session, and he already had to do that crap to kill Anthony, who was pissy for the whole fight, saying that everyone was against him. In the end, he went away because of personal things after I talked to him about his attitude. At least this encounter helped me to grow a spine to try not to let that crap slide. Yep. You know how I said the problem was also on the onus of the DM saying no to the player? That was that. Sometimes you just say no to the player. They want to turn to a missile, a meteor, a nuke, just not part of the system. You can't do that. You can polymorph yourself into a T-Rex if you want to, but a missile? Nope, just not gonna be able to do it. If it's a medieval setting, listen, DM, it's about you are the DM. You're allowed to say no to your players, especially if they're asking for something absolutely ridiculous or absurd. Turning to a missile, turning to a meteor? Why would you allow a player to do that? Now, of course, they're gonna abuse that sort of system if you just be a people pleaser the whole time. At times, it's actually more beneficial and healthy to say no to the player, especially if they're asking for something absurd, overpowered, or ridiculous. I have to say no to my players at times whenever they ask for something absolutely absurd or ridiculous. Yeah, they'll still ask it and stuff just to see my limits and everything, but like at the end of the day, as a DM, it's up to me to decide when to say no to things and when to allow certain things. In this situation though, it's a good lesson to learn to say no to people, especially problem players, that ask for something absolutely absurd and ridiculous. Either way, Tony here is definitely a problem, but it's also a good lesson on the DM to learn how to say no and when to say no. Either way, next story. DM traps players on a death loop cycle and forces players to babysit evil DMPCs. Hey everyone, I'm new to the community here, although I've been listening to RPG horror stories all the time from different YouTubers. I have a cautionary tale here about what happened when a fledgling DM doesn't take advice well, and when they try to railroad players. Hope you enjoy. Let the pain commence. The story begins when I introduced a good friend of mine at the time to D&D, a friend we'll call Castor. It was Castor who introduced me to a few other interested in D&D like he was, and so we forged a group of 6 to 7 people together, all except me new to the game and eager to learn the thrills of TTRPG. I had 6 years experience as a player and 3 as a DM, so I made an adventure that ended up lasting for years, all of which the party was eager to play in and grow the first characters. Castor had some occasional things he needed to work on. I could share more stories later if you want, but for the most part he took D&D well and ended up surprising me with a revelation I would later look back on with some regret. At some point Castor revealed to me he wanted to make his own campaign and turned to me for guidance. We would hang out many times outside of D&D in order to help him build his world. Sometimes I would listen for a few hours and give a little ideas or tweaks. Other times I'll be a more active collaborator in his world building. As an avid D&D fan, I was beyond ecstatic to see a player of mine growing and starting a campaign for their own, and I couldn't wait to play it. Before I go any further, I just want to say I knew Castor's campaign would be a little rough around the edges. Someone with more experience as a DM and a player, I could tell Castor would need some guidance with the technical aspect of running his game, and he was actually agreeable with this, asking for guidance sometimes or wanting feedback at the end of a session. That being said, I was not prepared for what I'm about to share with you. This story started off so nice, wanting guidance, opinions and stuff, and a little bit of feedback and help, but horror haven't struck yet. This isn't RPG horror stories after all. Something bad is brewing. I just know it. I mean, if it didn't give away the fact that it's on RPG horror stories and we're reading it right now, then I don't know what will. The session 0 was really cool, with everyone rolling up some interesting characters. A rogue assassin on a run, a child bard with a broken home, a druidic adventurer with a broken home, and my character, a one-armed human fighter looking to avenge his dead wife. The first problem came up the first session when the story started with a TPK via Red Dragon before our first dice roll. Before the journey started, we were all dead. Is your friend Casper borrowing from Critical Role? Isn't that how the Vox Machina show starts? With literally a TPK of a dragon or something? Is that just how it started? Okay, well whatever, let's keep going. Castor used this to introduce us to a mechanic where TPKs would result in a time rewind, similar to some anime he was really fond of. I remember him talking about this before when we were hanging out, but I expressed to him that it may not be the best idea to use. In hindsight, I should have been more firm about this, but here we were. reviving an hour before and told by the DM we need to figure out a way not to die again. In some ways it was an interesting way to run the plot, but more often than not, it would lead us to fighting overpowered enemies with encounters that weren't balanced correctly. After the first 2 to 3 death battles, as I would call them, Caster was agreeable and balanced the encounters. But after this point, he would argue and say that since TPKs just mean a reset in time and not permadeath, he didn't need to balance the game, and coming back each time may give us clues on new opportunities to beat these tougher opponents. So we're turning a game of D&D into Dark Souls, because that's what you do in Dark Souls. You keep hitting a wall, keep dying to it, learn about it, and then eventually you beat it, grinding stats or whatever. Why are we playing Dark Souls in D&D? This problem would then lead to Caster not wanting to engage us in combat at all at some points, as I could tell he was having some trouble with balancing. I asked him about this a few times and offered to help, but he kept insisting we would reach combat. Even though if we ever tried to initiate combat, some NPCs or other outside circumstances would shut it down, unless it was a highly choreographed battle Caster planned. Well, then came the twins. The DM had a pair of DMPCs in the form of young vampiric children, 2 vampire twins inspired by an anime he enjoyed. Twins were abused in a horrible variety of ways I will not mention. Because of their trauma, they were psychotic killing machines who could coat their weapons in blood and wield them in a heightened state of power that made them ridiculously OP. I remember one time I asked him to see their character sheets, and he refused, only letting me know that they were level 20s. A pair of literal little monsters. You can't pull everything out of anime into a campaign, or at least if you do so, you gotta at least find ways to make it balanced and mesh well. But you can't just turn everything into overpowered little monsters that just get so overpowered for your characters that they can't do anything. Caster should have taken some feedback when OP said, hey, probably don't make encounters completely invincible, or don't work with the whole time mechanic because that'd be difficult to execute, because it is difficult to execute. Have you ever tried working with like a time thing for your D&D session? I ain't never done, because when I look at it, I realize, yeah, okay, I would not be able to run it successfully, at least not in this situation. It's something that required a lot of planning and knowing what the hell to even do and how to find ways for players to circumvent and find different solutions to stuff like this. It's just a lot. It's just a lot. Caster is a brand new DM, just got on his little training bike of DMing and wants to go for the biggest, steepest hills possible. And it's just not gonna work. The guy is gonna end up falling over and hurting himself and just crashing and burning. There was a questline I remember Caster was the most excited to have us play out. A criminal questline where we help this gnome criminal overlord help unite various bandit nations and small groups of civil unrest unite under his wing, a point at which the gnome justified that there would always be crime in this world, and as long as he could control it, the world would be a better place. The twins of course were a big part of it, as they were practically the pets of the gnome guy and his most loyal followers, him acting as a sort of a strange surrogate father to them. These two elements combined together meant that we would often encounter these two twin NPCs, having them come in and sweep up the mess. If a combat encounter had us TPK 2 or 3 times, they would just randomly show up, erase every thread, and contrive an excuse as to how they got there. The whole party talked to Caster about this at some point, saying we didn't want them to be babysat by his OP twins, but he ended up taking this in the opposite direction. He had us babysit them. You know, and I'm just realizing Casper is doing he's just shoving the NPCs immediately out of the gate, and I don't think that's a good approach. Once you have experience for DMing and figure out what to do and kind of like can ease a DMPC in and figure out what a DMPC is supposed to do, which is uplift the party, then you could probably put one in when you have the full understanding of what the effect the DMPC should accomplish. If the DMPC makes the party feel obsolete, like the twins are doing, then that's not a good DMPC. If they make the party feel obsolete and they clean up their messes and clean up the fights and make everything feel trivial and contrived, then it's just not a good game for players to play. Players don't enjoy having somebody step in and fight the fights for them. They want to be able to be the ones, the victors, the ones that defeat the bad guy, get the loot and stuff, you know? That's what they want. They don't want somebody else to come in and clean up the mess, and now the players are going to be forced to babysit the twins. Enjoy. Perhaps our kindness, or maybe survival instinct, who would want to fight level 20 vampire child level 3 or 4? The party would be nice to the children and show them kindness, which would offer nice little glimpses into the lost humanity. That being said, the gnome guy used this as an opportunity to rein us into his criminal syndicate, offering us whatever we sought and saying that the children liked us. My character was a lawful neutral guy, understanding the point of law and order and trying to be the best and most decent folk, but not afraid to break rules and do dirty work if it was for the greater good. That being said, my character was not interested in joining the gnome syndicate. so my screen time was cut drastically in a lot of areas. Other times having my guys sent on random missions that most of us could tell was busy work. I asked Caster if there was some other angle I could work, and he did, but not in the way I hoped for. He ended up resurrecting my character's dead wife and making her an evil NPC that walked around like a Grim Reaper ripoff, complete with dark armor and a scythe. I wasn't asked about that until later on, but by then I didn't want to stifle his creativity and went along with it, though I should have told him my apprehensions. Now, my character's wife was some sort of a dark, evil spirit. Yay. Well, that's another taboo. Rewriting something from the character's story or trying to pull it without checking with the player. Oh, you have a dead wife? No, she's not Grim Reaper, is a BBG in the story. Woo! Oh, I didn't check with you? Well, too bad, it's not there. Like, at least you could just be like, hey, is it cool if I bring back your dead wife in some sort of a story plot? Do you want your character to have some sort of a story plot? It could have been any other evil spirit. Didn't have to be someone's dead wife, you know? At the time, the child bard, controlled by a player I will call Hyper, was beginning to hang out with the twins more outside the missions, which had me worried due to some outside events. See, Caster had an IRL crush on Hyper and was beginning to act strange around her, getting to the point where he would literally try to always be next to her and sometimes mimic her actions, try to copy her personality to get her to notice him. We called him out on this and he feigned innocence while simultaneously apologizing. This put aside Caster's strange actions against Hyper IRL. They had more instances of doing this with other women at the table. I can share more later, but Hyper's bard was not the best pal of the vampire twins, and she got all this screen time for a while. There was a time the party split with some of us seeking for information in New Town about various guild merchants and looking for answers to rumors of a criminal presence in New Town. This got 1/3 of the session's screen time, with the other 2/3 dedicated to Hyper's character. Another female character and the twins going to a candy shop, inexplicably doted up by the shop owner and given tons of free candy samples to try. So here we were, with one half of the party put on hold to watch the other half eat candy. This wasn't the worst of it, however. Okay, now we have a situation where basically the DM has a crush on a player, and because they have a crush on the player, they want to spend all the time with the player character and their DMPCs. This is like all the RPG horror story sins for DMs. I can't believe OP, like, I know you said you offer advice if they asked for it, but you really probably should have stepped in and said, just, you can't do this kind of stuff, man. You can't do this stuff. Undo this, undo that, retcon it, and just do it proper, do it regular. Just don't do this. Don't do this. This is cringe. This is unironic cringe. It's not fun cringe, it's just ironic cringe. We gotta unroll this brain rot, basically. I don't know what's going on with me. I think it's because like 5 in the morning, my vocabulary is just rotting away. I'm using the word brain rot so unironically and the word cringe unironically. That's kind of cringe too. Anyway, continue with the story. When the twins would follow us around, they would no longer help us in combat. DM took it to heart that we didn't want to be babied in combat, yet anytime there was a chance for them to fight, which it was established they loved to kill, they would just leave combat and hang back, doing childish shenanigans and watching us die time after time, not even lifting a finger if we asked for help. On top of that, there was a point where the party members who joined the syndicate, I remained firm not joining despite feeling railroaded to hell by the fact that the gnome was not our only quest giver, had to go talk to the gnome and turn in a quest. There was a little flavor moment of the twins in their own room, playing with toys and hanging out, of course. Hyper wanted to see what was going on. For 30 minutes to an hour, we all watched in confusion as the campaign was put on pause for Hyper, a random girl NPC, and the twins to all play toy dragons and chips in their room. A time well spent, I suppose. God, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you say anything? Caster has a grasp on generally what to do, but what they're focusing on is all the things that they want to do and not what the party wants to do. And specifically about anytime Hyper wants to do anything, Caster's all about that. You know, 30 minutes to an hour doing roleplay with toys. For no reason. You should have spoke up. You're supposed to have a conversation about this way before this current moment. I hope this story ends with you actually speaking up and ending this and changes need to be made in this situation desperately. If you guys don't talk about this right now, I'm gonna get really mad. I wish I could say this story had a good end, but it does not. I apologize for how scatterbrained it was, but as you can tell, things did get a bit derailed as time went on in order to force us to be around the DM's preferred NPCs. At some point, there was a falling out in the group IRL due to some things I will not talk about here, and the game just sort of fizzled out. I hope you enjoyed this story. what Caster did is not okay. The little committed basically as many DMing sins as possible with DMPCs, unwinnable fights, mechanics that are completely untested, and just spending so much time with DMPCs and DMPC focus, as well as you literally using that time to try to crush on somebody. Clearly Caster wanted to have help and wanted feedback. More feedback should have given, and somebody at some point, OP or anybody else, should have stepped in and said, this is not going well, bud. This is not going well. This should be adjusted. That should be adjusted. Have a proper sit down and a heart to heart and say, listen, I want you to succeed, Caster. But if you're going to keep running the campaign this way, things are not going to go well. These DMPCs, they gotta go. The time mechanic needs to be adjusted. Overpowered encounters definitely need to be rebalanced out completely. You need to rebalance out. Start with baby steps. Maybe start with like a adventure module, something beginner friendly, you know, kind of get the general gist of things, and then get creative afterwards once you feel confident that you can do some proper world building and story building that's not going to stifle the focus from the players and onto your DMPCs that are literally overpowered gods. Because that's basically what it is. It's just focus on my cute DMPCs, unless we focus on Hyper because I have a crush on Hyper. Hey Hyper, does your character want to do something with these weird vampire children? Cool, let's spend 6 hours doing that. With all the fun times also come problems, and just like with problem players, there's also problem DMs. You want to try to guide them in a good direction and a positive direction, reinforce positive good things instead of just allowing them run amok, and learn that, hey, having overpowered vampire children that you can have a focus with so your crush's character can hang out with them for 6.5 hours, that's perfectly fine. That's okay. I feel like the problem here is lack of communication, and nobody spoke up when they should have. And also Caster, for whatever reason, really was hell-bent on adding those anime mechanics and stuff. Now, there's nothing's wrong with adding inspiration from anime into your game, but there's just too much. There's too much for a new DM to handle. This should have been done way later when he has like at least, I don't know, half a year experience. I don't know, man. What do y'all think about this situation? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to see what y'all say. And with that, that's going to be all our stories for today. I want to thank you very much for watching, and thanks so much for being here. If you like what I do, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Also, if the RPG Horror Stories ever goes down, or if you want to submit your own personalized horror story, email is down in the description below. I'll see you again in more Tales tomorrow. Bye-bye.